what I sort of think sometimes happens is that it kind of ends up fuzzing too many ideas rather than a clear idea about what you want to be as an artist. And there is nothing more in art than having a voice. It doesn't matter whether your art is infantile painting or sonic sculptures. It doesn't matter. As long as you've got a voice that you put that on and people go, oh, I know who that is. Yeah. I see that. I know who that is. That's the most important thing that any artist can have.
Anyway, let me introduce you properly.
Yes.
So a round of applause for me, but from everyone watching in a couple of weeks. My absolute pleasure to welcome the wonderful Mr. Stephen White.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Drummer extraordinaire. On face value, people know you because of all the extensive years of work with the man of many personalities, Mr. Paul Weller. But there's a hell of a lot more than that.
Yeah.
I mean, you've worked with the dearly departed legends of music, John Lord, Roux, Ian Dury, millions of things beyond Paul Weller. You've had your own bands, loads of different stuff. Occasional vocalist, occasional lyricist, but also, where I want to start, RTS award-winning documentary spearhead and presenter for Sky Arts, which I think is great because if I just backtrack slightly, I'd say half the interviews I've done so far, we've all got round to talking about you, and every single person has gone, he's amazing. And this isn't just drummers. So that sort of level of esteem you're held in inside the music industry. I don't mean, like brand new record labels who are just working with teenagers and whatnot, but I'm sort of like, within the core of the music industry. And then if you then come to the Sky Arts documentary and, how successful that was as well, can you explain the process of it and all the workings around actually getting it up and running as well?
It was a very simple. I originally thought that it was a wind-up because Sally, my wife, went to the TV awards and maybe just possibly had a glass of wine, and she got talking to Phil Edgar Jones, who is the head of Sky Arts, and Phil is a drumming enthusiast. And Sally came home and she said, "You've got your own series on Sky Arts," and I was like, "What?" Did you have a drink tonight, kind of thing? And she was like, "No, I'm serious. It's going to happen. It's going to happen." And I was like, I really didn't think anything of it. And then all of a sudden, literally that afternoon, I got an email from Phil Edgar Jones saying, "I really want to do this thing. We're going to get a guy called Chris Lent, who originally did the Rock School back in the 80s and has done a lot of brilliant documentary making. And Chris Wilson, a very esteemed music and documentary maker, really super talented people." And I would say literally within about 4 days, I was sat in a room at wall to wall with Chris Lent and Chris Wilson, and we were planning a 4-part documentary series. It was that quick.
Wow.
And the incredible thing was that what we did was we just threw a load of stuff in the air, and Chris Wilson just said, "Look, as with most sort of documentaries, let's not try and make it like any other documentary," which is what you always want to do. And I just said, I really want, I recited back to John Lord. What happened with John Lord was that, when I was working with John, I used to sit after a gig John was a very gregarious guy, and you sit and a glass of wine, and he would just regale you with just the most amazing stories about meeting Jimi Hendrix and Miles Davis. And, you just kind of got topped every time by And I always used to say to John, "You've got to write a book, John. You have to write a book." And, just to log all this amazing stuff. And literally before we knew it, he was gone. And then I'd got fairly close to Mitch Mitchell about around 2008, 2009, just before Mitch died. And suddenly started with these telephone conversations with Mitch Mitchell and had exactly the same thing with Mitch. It's like 1 minute he was here, next minute he was no longer with us. And all of his, whether he wanted to, but all of his memories were just not documented in a way that they should. So originally I wanted to do something that was along the lines of telling the story of the great British drummers, really. You know, what I know, Mooney and Bonham and Ringo, and and Sky were like, no, we could maybe broaden this out a little bit, and we do want it from the British standpoint, but we want to kind of keep it to a more rock sort of thing. And literally after that was the only note that we ever really got. And usually you get hundreds of notes from a TV company. And I threw my diary in the air and just said to Chris, like, look, we started off with 200 drummers, and we ended up with 40. And so these are the guys that we want. And we know we left people out, and there were certain people that we tried and we couldn't get for various reasons. And we ended up with 40. We contacted 30. We contacted all 40, and within a week, 38 of them had come back and agreed to do the documentary. So what we detected was a huge amount of love. Yeah. Real love. And literally, from the moment we started to do the interviews, Chris Wilson was just saying, we've really got something special here. And just going to see, people like Hal Blaine and Bernard Purdy and, and getting in touch with Chad Smith, and Chad just going, just come to my house and do it in my house. And you that wouldn't happen unless it was about drumming. Yeah. You have to go through managers and he's like, no, just come to my house and do it at the house. And, we ended up doing Hal Blaine's very last interview pretty much. And Jabo Starks is the last interview that Jabo did. And then all the younger players and some, like Victoria and, getting getting the girls in and getting just a variety of players in. And I think that the thing that we really realised when we started to watch the Rushes was just the warmth and enthusiasm about the subject. And at that point, we were talking about different ideas about voiceovers and stuff like that. And Chris just went, you're presenting it, you're doing it. You're doing it. Yeah. And that's when I just said to Sally, my wife, obviously with a career in television, you've got to sort of give me some pointers, just tell me. And, I worked at it, filming myself, feeling really uncomfortable, feeling really, really silly, because I've never done it, and just learned that to just pace myself and just to think about what I'm going to say, and I really enjoyed it. I absolutely loved the whole process. I love seeing it come together. I mean, as time's kind of gone on, I've, as we all have, worked out that music on its own is a very difficult thing to pursue. Just putting records out, I'm putting out something, not if you just want to do it for your creative juices, and but if you want some sort of career. For anybody in the creative arts now, it has to be a degree of portfolio. You have to be doing a bit of this, a bit of that, and if you're not in a position to have millions in the bank, you have to do it. And I for one really saw how much I enjoyed layering up music with the visual side of it, the visual aspect of it. And we then went along to the RTS, and we were nominated for a BAFTA. We didn't get into the final thing, but then we won the Venice Film Festival as well. And then and when we went to the RTS, the Royal Television Society Awards, Sally was saying to me, "Do you know how big this is?" And I'm going like, well, it's great, isn't it? She's going, no, but it's really, really big, and I'm going like, oh, right, okay. So we went in and we were talking to the lovely Andy Oliver, the TV chef, and Sally said, you should go and have your picture done, the winners thing, and the nominees thing, and I'm like, no, don't worry, let's just go in and get a drink, So we were getting our picture done, and then we went in and sat down, and I was talking to Phil Edgar Jones, who was at the table when they announced that we'd won. And I literally sort of looked up and he went, yes, it's you. You've won. And I was like, Jesus Christ. So I went up and, we had to go and do a little speech. And I just was so chuffed because I got to meet Romesh Ranganathan. And all I could think about saying to him was like, I've just won one of those.
Wicked.
And it was brilliant, and it was a lovely departure, to do something so consuming that because it was a year in the making, to do something that was so consuming on a different level than just trying to sort of make music happen, which is just so hard.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting you said that, because that's exactly what Yolanda Charles was saying when I spoke to her a month ago or so. It's like kind of like, obviously we all know about, you know, consuming music, you can get it for free or generally for free and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, to have a career as a musician or a band, it's all about the live shows and merchandise, which is obviously really almost impossible right now. But she made a deep point that it's like almost like the lack of respect for the people who make the music. Even though music brings joy to every single person's life who can hear and even who can't hear. You know, it's that core thing that even the vibrations of it, if someone's deaf, they still enjoy music to their own way. But on a general level, everybody I know in the world, from the most moody pensioner to the smallest toddler, has music in their life. Yeah. And it brings such a joy. And if you took that away, everyone's lives would be miserable. And so then you look at the scales and you go, trying to get a project off the ground, if it hasn't got a lot of things behind it and if it's of a certain age, and people just want it on Facebook and then they complain because you're not doing a gig in their town because the agent won't give you, you know, there's no money to do it. And then you get that sort of backlash of like, well, why haven't you played here? Why aren't you doing another record? Which I find astonishing, you know, and she does the same thing. It's like, it's okay for like being a side person for big acts, but when you want to do your own thing, unless you get a really lucky break and you get it into like a big film or something, it's impossible.
Well, I think there's lots of things going on in this country. I mean, we are truly seeing lots of schisms and chasms opening up in this country. And I do, you know, as an optimistic person, do genuinely worry about certain aspects of culture that we're going through. I mean, for a start, you know, we have gone fairly right-wing. We've gone very populist. And I mean, it's a very simple observation, you know, to the joyous leader of our country. Can you actually imagine him listening to any music? I can't.
Well, actually, apart from the Tory cabinet,
you know, everyone else. It's just they don't seem like people that appreciate culture. Yeah. And, you know, Philistinism is something that really does extend, it's not party political, but, you know, Margaret Thatcher didn't really like music. She didn't really like art and culture, you know, and it's a dichotomy because this country, the British Isles, are so ringing with art and culture and literature and talent and technical facility. You know, I mean, I did notice that the cultural minister, Mr. Dowden, had managed to have a Skype call with Tom Cruise to allow Mission Impossible 73 to start filming at Pinewood, which is great because there will be a lot of people, you know, but the true appreciation, it does sadden me because I do think, you know, having experienced you know, culture and art in Europe and traveling with us, we do know, you know, I do know that the role of a musician is appreciated on the continent much more than it is in this country. And what we're doing is we're turning our face away from Europe towards America, which, you know, the music, the main kind of thrust of music that I appreciate that comes from America has never been treated with anything but disrespect. Yeah. You know, and you know, whether it be the, you know, Southern Soul or Miles Davis or, you know, black spiritual music to Curtis Mayfield, you know, and them that kind of music is in an awful sort of you know, state, really. Yeah. So I think that when we have to look a little bit broader, we have to kind of accept that possibly for the moment, this kind of concept of professional musician, we've got to sort of turn it on its head a little bit and just accept that most people that ever pick an instrument up in the African subcontinent or, you know, in the Indian subcontinent or maybe in China, in a village in China, they play for the pure pleasure of it. And they play because there's a wedding. They play because they're feeling down. They play because they fancy having a few drinks and enjoying it. And they don't do it for this parallel reward that you're going to be able to make a living from it. Because at the moment, you know, the simple facts of the matter is it's very, very hard to do that, and it is going to be for some considerable time. So that doesn't mean to say that you shouldn't enjoy many aspects of music and practicing and learning and being expressive, but just don't get really, really frustrated if the financial rewards are not really forthcoming at the moment, because it is we are in a cycle. And I've said to like a few of my students that are have come to me and said, I just started making inroads as a pro musician, and now I'm thinking about getting a job as a chippy or something like that. And I'm saying, well, for the next year or so, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Because what you don't want to be is the person that sits around waiting to be told what to do.
Yeah.
They're the ones that don't make it.
Yeah.
Get out and just spread your wings a little bit. I mean, I thought I had visions of learning Japanese and becoming a wine sommelier or whatever. In this lockdown, nothing's happened. I'm just going to be looking forward to coming out of it with my sanity, basically, and a functioning liver. That's going to be my goal. But I just think that sometimes it's a hard and fast reality. There's a number of things that are conspiring. We're not in a particularly culturally a place that appreciates culture that much, so we've got to accept that. On top of that, we've got this horrible thing flying about that it's just going to be tough. But in light of that, hopefully what I'd like to see some of the younger generation coming through and having something to say about it. We want some protest songs. I don't want to see 55-year-old blokes doing protest songs. I want to see 18-year-olds doing protest songs, and I'm sure it will be out there. Whether it ever gets to the main media, it doesn't really matter, because the main media isn't going to appeal to these younger musicians anyway.
No, absolutely, and that echoes a point that Sterling Campbell was talking about, because I was saying, how are you getting on with all the lockdown, and he's saying, well, look, we survived 9/11, etc., etc. But he's saying, after World War II. We had all these sound engineers who were doing all the stuff for the war, and all these microphones and all these recording things. And that's what he said, that's when pop music recording started. Because it's how do we, the experience we've been through, how do we put that to a positive thing? And he was saying, you've got all these young producers and music makers who aren't adversely affected by being on their own, because they quite often make music in the box on their own. I mean, obviously they collaborate. He said, this could be their chance to start and say something really true to them, So, obviously we have to wait to see that. But the point, it's really interesting, the point you make about, people who make music for fun or because they're sad and they, it wants to bring some joy to the situation. That's kind of always been the case with people, and you'll know loads, and I know loads, that you knew when you were a kid and they wanted to be a musician, and maybe I was in a band with some boys and some girls, and then they all kind of fade away, and then they get their jobs and they go, oh no, there's no future in it. And yet the stubborn ones who music means that much more to them just carry on with it, kind of against the odds, just almost like to see how far you can take it, because then if it doesn't work, at least you've given it your all.
Yeah, so, and I mean, I think with music or being a creative person, it's like it's in your soul. It's like what you do, whether you can sustain it financially or not. It's the thing that that gives you most comfort. If to me, it's like I'm not religious. I'm an atheist, but when I listen to a certain piece I was listening to some Ennio Morricone this week, or listen to some Miles Davis, and it touches my soul, and that is as close to sort of spirituality. Whether I can play, whether the demand for 55-year-old drummers is still there when we come out of this, it doesn't really matter, because I know that music is there. And I was talking earlier to Don Powell, the drummer from Slade, and I am a huge Slade fan going right back, and it was amazing listening to him talking about the same kind of processes, that we just loved it. We just did it as kids, and before he met Noddy and Jim and Dave, that they were just playing around the pubs in Bilston because they loved it, because we loved it, because we just loved it, and that kept coming through. And that, I think, for me, is what I look for in any musician or anybody creative person who's going to do this for the longest time. And you know what? Some people, some people are not cut out for it. Some people don't want to do Twitter, and they don't want to do Facebook, and they don't want to do podcasts, and they don't want to do. They just want to make their music. And you wonder about somebody like a Nick Drake. How would they fare in this sort of time? You can't answer everybody's question for them, but it doesn't mean to say that music can't be a huge sort of therapy, a huge part of enjoyment, a huge part of your existence. It's not always about being a pro.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, I was talking to a guy called Mitch, or Tom Mitch, no, everyone calls him Mitch, who's a producer, but he's a bass player originally. And he was in a scene in Watford. Okay, Watford's got to be one of the hardest places to try and start to be taken seriously doing music, because basically there's no venues. It's too close to London for big bands to come to because they go and play in London. Yet the A&R people from London don't want to go to Watford. And so him and all his mates started this punk scene. They would go to like a village hall or whatever and just say, look, if we can hire this tonight, you'll have 300 kids and there's going to be no booze. And these are like pub owners and village hall owners like, bring it in. Now that scene spawned the Gallows, Haunts, Frank Carter and the Rattlesnakes, who were this proper hardcore punk scene. They're all going now, but also loads of managers and agents, producers and engineers, because they just did it themselves, because no one else was doing it. It's like the whole Slade thing. We just enjoyed it, so we did it. We made it work.
It is a case of, fortune favours the brave. It really does. And there is a kind of a wider thing, being involved in education that's changed from when I was learning the drums. I mean, the style of education was much more different. It was much more cut and dried. It was much more black and white. It was like if your teacher told you to do something, you kind of did it, And if you didn't, you wouldn't be allowed back, or there was a sort of a degree of like survival of the fittest, possibly. And obviously things have changed, times have changed. But what worries me is that sometimes we can be so accommodating on every level to everybody that wants to be a professional musician that we're missing the point of allowing their voices to actually explode. Because that's and to a certain degree, it is great to be. Going to get a wonderful qualification at maybe 23, 24. But when you look at what Jimi Hendrix was doing at 24 and what Paul McCartney was doing at 24, I just wonder sometimes if we have moved forward that much, and maybe we need, maybe it is going to take something like this to say, well, look, nobody's going to do it for me. I'm going to do it myself.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, what were you doing at the age of 24? I think you've made about 10 albums with a Star Council and toured the world. I mean,
it's 35 years on Monday since Live Aid, and I mean that's what I was doing 35 years ago, and I'd been professional for 3 years, and 3 years before that as a drummer, playing around sort of southeast London, but I was very clear about what I wanted to do, and I am so intrigued about the whole sort of notion of nurture and nature, because no one ever had to tell me to practice. There was never, it was just, I got up in the morning and I wanted to practice, and then I had to go to school, and then I wanted to practice, and I wanted to put records on, and I don't think, and I'm not looking for any kind of, slaps on the back, I was never the most naturally talented drummer. Mark Mondaisy is an incredibly talented natural drummer. Dennis Chambers is an incredibly natural talented drummer. Buddy Rich is an incredibly talented natural drummer. And there are other drummers that work really, really hard at it because they love it. And, and I sort of put myself into that sort of category. And no one ever had to tell me, oh, come on, Steve, you've not been practicing for a few days. And I think that we all had that trait to a certain degree of that particular sort of generation of musician. And that's what Ian Pace said, the most brilliant thing, which was a subtext to the documentary, when he was saying about that when the generation of drummers that came through at that time, whether it Mitch, Pacey, Cozy Powell, Ginger, Keith Moon, John Bonham, Kenny Jones, Ringo, that kind of whole sort of generation of players, and there was others, Bobby Elliott, people like that, but they all had this completely individual sound that even 55 years later, we still talk about those drummers, still talking about John Bonham, still talking about Keith Moon. And what Ian said was that what we had was a really little bite of the cherry. We might get to hear one record that a brother had that might have had Buddy Rich on it, or Louis Belson or something, and then we'd just listen to it, and we'd listen to it, and we'd listen to it, and we'd try and work out what we were trying to say with what we could hear, and we all became so individual. And I thought that's actually really...
Absolutely. It's that thing of almost like fucking up your interpretation of what they're doing because it's not them and you don't know. Yeah. And also they've got their influences and what you're listening to is their fucked up version of their influences.
Yeah.
And after a while that becomes you.
Sometimes, you do, it's a thing to just not... the Pandora's box has been opened, and if I want to see Tony Williams, I can just go to Tony Williams and Louis Belson and Aaron Spears and Vinnie Colaiuta and Miles and the Shadows and, whatever. I can just kind of like put it in. But what I sort of think sometimes happens is that it kind of ends up fuzzing too many ideas rather than a clear idea about what you want to be as an artist. And there is nothing more in art than having a voice. It doesn't matter whether your art is infantile painting or sonic sculptures. It doesn't matter. As long as you've got a voice that you put that on and people go, oh, I know who that is. I see that. I know who that is. That's the most important thing that any artist can have.
Absolutely. It's like, you saying that, I just thought of, okay, most people know who Henry Rollins is, okay? All right, a terrible singer, but he's Henry Rollins. Whether you put on one of his solo records or a Black Flag record, it's him. Yeah. Whereas you could have all these fabulous, beautifully, not articulate. Well, articulate in their in the way that they're phrasing and they're pitch perfect and their breathing techniques as singers. But they could be interchangeable, there's like the whole X Factor brigade. There is that lack of identity.
And it's the same with drummers. And I'm sure if you delve into YouTube enough, that it will be the same with bass players. It's just hundreds and hundreds of faceless technicians. And for me, technique is something like that. If your analogy is a craftsman, whether they're a craftsman or craftswoman that have their tools and their tools are kept highly maintained and looked after and treasured, and when they go to a certain job they get a certain tool out for the job and it does the job beautifully. That's what technique is. But with a lot of drummers and a lot of musicians now, they just seem to go in and just throw all their tools on the table. And that's like, and that's what I hear, and I just kind of I'm looking at drumming and going, well, what relevance has that got to Africa, to the spirit, to the clave, to the lineage, that why we have backbeats. Where does that come from? The art and grace of Philly Joe Jones. What relevance has that got to that? But then, in today's kind of cancel culture, it's just best to shut up, really, and go with a very old proverb. As John Thompson's mum said, if you've got nothing nice to say, don't say anything.
No, true. But the point still remains, though. That's why some artists, like, I don't know, Jerry Cinnamon, stands out so much, because he sounds like him. Yeah, totally. And it's become a revelation, and people are like, oh my God, you should hear Jerry Cinnamon. So I listen to Jerry, and I'm like, well, I'm of a certain age, and I'm like, okay. Yeah. Well, maybe, no disrespect, Jerry. No. But for a new generation, like that's the first time they've heard someone that doesn't sound like everything else. Yeah. So I was listening to an art, and I suppose as well is that we've all got we have our other responsibilities. I don't sort of kind of see my passion does not diminish, but my sort of vitality, and I'm not constantly obsessing about what the NME think about what I'm doing and stuff like that. That I've moved. I never did anyway, but. Doesn't matter. I know my place. I know my age. I know what I'm supposed to be doing. I know my role. So when you see stuff that is kind of presented to you that is supposedly representing younger musicians. I mean, there was a thing on the BBC yesterday about that music's got faster and happier in the last couple of years, and the three particular artists they sort of represented were all very squeaky clean, one male, two females, and
and the chances are that to your average 18, 19-year-old, they probably think that they are as irrelevant as I do, you know, because they're into like the drill, they're into grind, they're into, you know, sort of scenes now. You know, you can find your scene, your community, much, I suppose, online, much more than you could when we were younger musicians. So I don't kind of sit there going, oh, it's not as good as when I was a kid. It isn't as good as when I was a kid for me, because it's just different. It's different to the point where I embrace what I like about it, but I just will turn around and go, I don't care about that. I'm not interested in that. And I'm not going to try and be down with the kids, you know, because I'm not a kid, you know, but I do I've always got an ear out, you know, for new stuff and for new artists. And it's ironically, it will be, you know, albums are not something that seems to, you know, it will be tracks, and it might be my daughter Christabel might play me something, and 90% of the time I don't like it, or Curtis, my son, might play me something, and you go, wow, that's really good, that, you know, and you hear it, and you have to kind of think that, you know, what you don't want to end up sounding like is your nan and granddad the first time they heard the Sex Pistols. You know, that's not how I feel. You know, the mainstream media, even more these days, will push a very narrow narrative. So it is going to be sort of certain artists, and they're never going to give, you know, they'll let one or two now through now and then that will become cause celebs, you know, and I love Stormzy, it's great, you know, but I'm sure, not that I've investigated it, but I'm sure there are probably 25 guys and girls out there that are doing what he does and I'm sure he's helping them out, you know. I'm sure he's encouraging them, but we like to have one, you know, one from there and one from there and one from there, and that's the mass media, that's what it is. But that doesn't mean to say there's not loads and loads of great things going on, you know, in pockets and in you know, it's a big world now, and you know, if you're really into sort of a certain kind of music, you might be able to find a little group of boys and girls in Moscow that are into the same kind of thing. That's what I think is great about the internet. You know, that opening up of of potential communication. I think that is a really, really good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And you kind of described the Mercury Music Prize there. Bit of that, bit of that, bit of that, bit of that. But
it's tokenistic, isn't it, Damon? Let's be absolutely honest, right? You know, there's very, very few people that ever get to the top echelons in the music business that are not white men. You know,
of course.
You know, I'm not being all sort of political, but, you know, well, you should be political. But, you know, eventually it does get to the top, and it's kind of the same old faces, a bit like British politics, you know, because for 1,000 years, nothing ever gets broken up in this country. Nothing ever. It's just kind of. It doesn't get broken up and has to be kind of rearranged in a different order. It just gradually falls apart. You know, and that's what's happened with the labels, and you know, that to a certain degree, none of the labels saw what streaming was all about until they started doing deals with them. But you know, the potential in the very early days, it was like, you know, what do we have to really do to be involved? Oh, nothing. Let's just wait and see. And all of a sudden, we all got shafted because of deals that were made, be it you know, in boardrooms that we have nothing to know about. But you know, those same people are the same people. You know, it gets up to a certain sort of top thing in this, and you only ever go sideways. You know,
absolutely, yeah.
That's how it is.
Yeah. So, okay, let's flip you right back to the beginning then. Okay, obviously you discovered this passion for drumming.
Yeah.
Was there a particular musical thing that you heard and you went, wow? Because pretty much everyone I've spoken to have said yes, and mine was, I've probably told you before, was just about to go to school, having my cornflakes, and on Radio 1, The Cutter by Echo and the Bunnymen came on, and it opened this world of what is that? But I knew I wanted that. Yeah. So was there a particular tune for you?
The first time for me, like probably hearing music live, was a Boys Brigade band, actually hearing people making a description of music together. And I loved the ragged sort of just volume of it. I thought, you know, because they weren't great players playing bugles and drums, but I just thought when people get together and just kind of put their heart and soul into it, it's a good noise, you know. And it sort of reminded me a little bit like of a New Orleans kind of band, you know. But then for me, because I was interested in drumming, one of the first singles I ever got was Let There Be Drums by Sandy Nelson. You know, a bit of a surf kind of classic. a sort of dirty Dwayne Eddy type sort of guitar, but these drums, just covered in reverb and just sounding really like muscular and for me, melodic, and they were on their own. That and I guess that for me was that connection to what I think drums are, which is spiritual. They're drum. Any drummer that gets beyond a certain sort of point can identify and appreciate what's come from Africa, and that kind of record had that kind of sort of earthiness. So for then, it was really a path of discovery going backwards, because then I through the teacher that I had, which is a guy called George Scott, I got to hear Gene Krupa, and Gene Krupa playing on the Benny Goodman's 1938 Sing 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 live from Carnegie Hall was just like, what is that, And then it was Buddy Rich, and Buddy, and I got to and Louis Bellson, and I discovered these people all at the same time because of somebody that was working with my dad had a compilation album called Kings of Percussion. So I had Sandy Nelson on my little dance set record player, and then I got Kings of Percussion with Krupa, Rich, and Belson, and it was like that was it for 2 years. It was mind blown. It was like 2 years, just like doing exactly what Pacey said. You just kind of listening to it. And I used to put on there was a version that Buddy did of Caravan, the famous ballad, and he did it as a very, very slow small group thing. It wasn't really like balls out type version. It was really kind of slow with a flute doing the lead line, and it was really beautiful. And then Buddy sort of takes it into this solo where the expression is metrically modulating, where it'll start off and then he just brings it back to nothing with a splash cymbal. It is, and I just used to listen to that and think, God, the sound of that. Where was the microphones? Why did it? And that was really it for me, that sort of revelation. And it's obviously I moved into a much wider sort of taste, but I still get sort of goosebumps, and and I still own those records. I've still got them, and I still, when I feel wanting a bit of inspiration, I can put on some of that Buddy or Louis Bellson, and the fire just comes sort of raging back. I love it.
Yeah, it's really interesting the way you sang the drum part from Let There Be Drums, because you said it's almost it's really musical, because obviously we worked together for a couple of years at least, but quite a lot, not really great drummers, but a lot of technically accomplished drummers that you've seen, I've seen it in students. They approach drums as drums. They don't approach it as a musical instrument where it's actually melodic and it's saying something. Which is what I noticed early doors working with you when we first started working with Paul. I think it was like Stanley Road or whatever. You would ask him what the songs were about. You'd often read the lyrics before you'd even think of the drums, which then puts you in a totally different headspace about what it is you're going to bring to the song. It's your approach, and it's very much what it's about the song.
And that's, I mean, I remember there was a particular song, I think, a song called Frightened. I think, did you play bass on that one? And so Frightened, for me, I remember Paul wrote this song and everyone was going on, well, so what's the lyrics? What's it about? It's about cocaine, is it? Because I think there might have been a little bit of that going on at that time with, in that scene. But he basically said, no, it's not about that. I'm not going to really tell you what it's about. And we were talking, and I remember talking to a few people and saying, oh yeah, it's about party, it's about being like coming on the downer and all that. And I just said, I think it's, it sounds like being a dad. And he went, that's exactly what it's about. And when I constructed the drum part, I literally started off with quarter notes on the hi-hat, and bass drum on 1 and 3, and just rim shot on 2 and 4, which is literally the most basic beat that you can come up with. And that's the out of the intro into the first verse. Because for me, that's what it's like being a father for the very first time. You're literally going, oh dear, what do I, and then in the bridge or the chorus, I doubled the hi-hat up as the confidence kind of grew. And whether anybody ever notices that, it doesn't matter. You know, I used to want to put something in based on what I was hearing and what the person that wrote the song actually wanted to express, and that stood me in good stead when I worked with. We did some stuff with John Martin. It certainly put me in good stead working with Ian Dury, because it was all about the lyrics, you know. And I just think that, you know, sometimes it's like because nowadays a lot of young musicians in general, their journey doesn't start in a crappy rehearsal room with no heating. It starts in a practice room, or it starts in a back of a music store, or it stands like playing along to tracks. So that sort of development of like, what's it about? What's it actually about? Oh, I don't really know. And again, you know, sort of talking to Don earlier, and he was saying about the Slade song "Far, Far Away." In that song, Don that Noddy wrote, he mentions the Bahamas, and I remember what's the Bahamas? He said, well, when we were like 19, we went and played. We thought we were going to do our Germany thing for 2 months in the Bahamas at a hotel.
Wow!
And we booked into the Sheraton, and I'm paraphrasing Don's story, but after being in the Sheraton for 6 weeks, having room service and putting drinks on the room, they got the bill. And you know, it's a brilliant story. And then that word in that Slade song comes up, and it's like I could see how much it meant to him, because there's meaning, and you know, so I say that for any drummer, you know, what are you trying to say? What are you trying to say? As much as the lyricist is trying to say, the writer, what are you trying to say with what you contribute? That's why Ringo Starr, you know, his drumming parts for that band were perfection. And 55, 60 years later, drummers are still trying to get it right.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I mean, that's what marks out, you know, people who are musicians as opposed to great players. Because it is all about interaction. It's about the social side of it. It's about, you know, being able to get on with people, the empathy for what other people are doing, listening, the spaces in the notes. Because, you know, the simplest part, the simplest bass line that I could probably ever come up with, it's not because I'm thinking, oh, it really needs to be simple, but because that's what fits right there, and that's what brings that bit to life.
Yeah.
I remember Yolanda was saying something, and she was rehearsing with you and Paul. She couldn't remember the song, and, you know, you played through it. She'd learnt the part. I think it was like probably off the first solo album. Yeah. And Paul was like, fuck it, let's take it off the set list. And she went home and she was really pissed off about it. She's like, I'd learnt it really well. And then she put the record on, which is probably Paul playing or Marco. And she's like, it's the feeling. It's the slide into the note. Yeah. It's playing it on the fatter strings, but higher up so it gets more warmth. And then the next day in rehearsal, she said, oh, Paul, can we have a run through that? He was like, oh, whatever. And she played it with that intent. He's like, right, it's going back in the fucking set. Yeah. It's that, those little attentions to detail and care. Yeah. You know, it's like, because it has to work together. Otherwise, it's a science, not an art. Well, that's the sort of, a danger of society at the moment. And it is, everything comes back to society. And you know, we are being encouraged to live in insularity more and more, devices that are, comforting because you can put the earphones in and just, and be in your own little world. And I see it with the twins, but that's different. And I'm not saying there's not good things about that. I'm really not. But there is definitely, something to be said about being in that situation of that crappy church hall with no heating, doing covers as you used to start off doing, and just doing the same cover because you didn't know any else. But then somebody going, well, I've written a little idea based around that chord that I heard on that song, and it goes like this. Oh, well, I've been away, and I've just been listening to Jimi Hendrix, and I just was listening to Noel Redding played a bass on this, and he does this. Oh, we got our own song, and that story, when sort of lots of this kind of time when I've been, having the time to check out what people have been saying and their podcasts and things like that. It's those stories that I find most rewarding and most interesting, and it has a very clear structure. Yeah. We just got together and we were mates and we were this and then we, and then we started writing our own tunes, and the amount of sort of
bands that started off doing Motown covers and then, you know, gravitated towards doing their own thing. It's that for me is such an amazing path to get to where you actually are, to being good at what you actually do and knowing your role, you know, knowing your place. And yeah, it's a different world. But you know, I think that it's like it's never probably at the moment with sort of even some of our most kind of hip current bands, they're not in what I would say particularly young, you know, late 20s, early 30s, which is young to me. But, you know, it's like it really is time for some bands of 17-year-olds to, you know, boys, girls, I don't care, you know, just there's a great opportunity at the moment to do it, you know, especially with the way that everybody's kind of become a TV studio. I've done the same. You know, I've got my Final Cut Pro and my Logic and my designated broadband and all that kind of thing, which I didn't have 4 months ago. So the thing is calling out to any labels. What you could be looking at for now is just the marketing. That's all you need to be doing, which is the difficult part. Yeah. Because, you know, the bands can do the rest, you know. I've got probably more technology in this drum room than the Beatles had to make all of their records.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I know. It is, and it's that thing of being brave as well, and being committed to it, and being brave. And I think, and it's obviously come from my background and yours, but it's the same experience of this is all we know. It's so exciting, and then out of that, someone goes, "I've got this little thing," and as you said, you got pieced together, and then all of a sudden, you're starting to create your own identity.
That's it. Which
is purely from working together and not being afraid for someone else into the room to go, well, that's a bit shit. Yeah. But even if they do, out of those moments of, that's a bit shit, why don't we try this? Yeah. That's when it goes, dunk, dunk, dunk. Which, you know, when you get the whole generation of people who love music, but their idea is, there's a guy or a girl on YouTube playing the drum part or the bass part or the guitar part from a Foo Fighters track. I'm going to learn what they do. You're getting 3 steps away from what that was. And also, that's a band, if you like that band, that should influence you, but don't copy them. Yeah. You know, and then you get this sort of like dilution. And as someone really cool once said to me, go to the cow, not the milkshake. Yeah. So go to the source of it, not the watered down, filtered, packaged.
Yeah. You know. Absolutely.
And it's also if someone shows you how to do something exactly, you don't get it wrong.
I mean, I think that there has been there is a kind of a wider acceptance and change in music business. That learning a musical instrument has become. You go dancing on a Monday, you go to football on a Tuesday or ballet or whatever, you know, boys or girls, I don't care. But, you know, and then on Wednesday you go for your drumming lesson and or your guitar lesson and, you know, what grade are you? You know, what grade are you? Oh, I'm a grade this because I can play this Metallica song, you know, and that to me is turning music into a leisure pursuit. You know, it's very, very different from the harsh realities. The way I like to, you know, we're football fans, is going to watch a football match and at half time they have, you know, somebody coming up doing a million keepy uppies, and then, you know, as the big sort of centre back walks back onto the pitch and just elbows him, you kind of know what football is about. It's like it's a different thing, and I think that's actually changed, and you know, it is kind of more difficult to sort of be to find those kind of places to play. I guess that you know, those church halls. You know, I can't imagine there's many sort of community centres that are going to want somebody racking up with a bunch of old Marshalls and stuff like that, because we don't want to offend the neighbours, and you know, so we've all got a bit kind of conservative with a small c in terms of encouraging our young talent. And at this point in time, we really need to be doing that. We need to be really encouraging all of these youngsters that have had a really awful year, you know, in their own, you know, very disruptive, and you know, it's great. Oh, we're going to be off half a year from school. For the majority of kids, that's not a good thing, and it's a really, really bad thing, because they're not even getting looked after, you know. So I think we do owe it to keep a real good eye. But out of this, hopefully, I'm hoping that people are sort of checking stuff out and saying, like, when this is all over, we will find an old Churchill and we will kind of go in and do some Little Richard songs, and we'll then see where it sort of takes us. And because that is that quintessential British band in any sort of way, shape or form is what we do best in terms of pop music, and that's what I think we maybe need a few more of at the moment.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a band that really about to have a hit. It's their first ever single from Wigan called the Lathams, right? And they're signed to, I can't remember the name of the management company. I don't even know if they've got a deal, but they're really young as well, and they've just done that.
Yeah.
I know, but people probably think, oh, they've only formed last week. They've been together for about 3 years, but they started when they were 13 and 14.
Yeah.
And they've been through about 800 songs, and shitty ideas, and been through the ringer, and like probably one's left, and because they, his mum didn't want him to be in the band anymore. And then they've got a record together, and people are going mental for it because it sounds like itself. It sounds like a band. It's got influences, but whether you like it or not, you go, oh, that's them.
Yeah. I was in on a very. Sally and I got invited to go to one of her work colleagues' barbecues many years ago, and the lady in question said, "My son really wants you to check his band out, and they're going to be playing in the garden. Would you give them a listen? Would you give them a listen?" And I was like, "Of course I will. It'd be lovely. How old are they?" I was like, "Oh, they're only 14, 15, but they're really keen. They're really keen." So we went to the party, and at sort of 4:00, the band came out and they played, and and I was like, actually, they can really play. And I spoke to the very, very proud mum, and I got introduced to young Matt Healy, and it was the 1975, and they were like literally in their mum's garden under a marquee,
Yeah.
and it was you could tell at that point, it was 3 of them that were in the original band, and you could tell at that point that they've got something here. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
I want to see more of that. I want to be invited to more parties.
Right. So I meant to write these down. Some people have replied to the Twitter thing with some questions for us. I'm going to try and remember. But before I get to that, I'm going to ask you this question. You're either going to enjoy it or not enjoy it. So I've had 2 responses. One is, oh, for fuck's sake, you can't ask me that. And the other one is like, oh, yeah, great. Well, they're these. If you could pick 3 things that you've played on that stand out for you for some reason, not necessarily because it's the most successful or blah, 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 but just 3 things, and we'll put links to them, 3 things that stand out for you.
I would have to say the Paris Match, the Style Council. For lots of reasons. I think it's an absolutely beautiful song. I'd like to say something that we did, which is Overshadowed, which I think is I think when we did that record, and particularly that song, and it was quite hard to sort of make that record when we're all in different parts of the country, but in another time, there are songs on that record that would have been absolutely massive. Yeah. But it was another time. But I'm incredibly proud of that song. I think it's really quite an amazing, performance in general. And it's beautifully sung as well and played. So I love that one as it's something that's sort of more recent. And then, a third one. I've got a lot. I mean, I'm really chuffed with a lot of the stuff that I did with Chris Hagen, Joel White. A song called The 11th Hour, which ended up being on Cold Call. So one from the past, the dim and distant past. And I have to say, I mean, there's so many tunes that I played on. Musically, I don't have any resentments or about all the stuff that I did with Paul. 300 songs or whatever, and congratulations, because I think he's number 1 today. So that's all good luck to that. But it just that kind of body of work. But there's also things that I've done that, like I say, and I think say something like The 11th Hour, something like Overshadowed, and then going right back to the start. There's 3 things that. And Paul doesn't need the money, so
no, but he needs a haircut.
He's got that sort of that Iggy Pop thing going on now. I know.
Let me try and remember these questions. Okay, yeah. My apologies to whoever sent this in, but the question for Steve White was, who have you not played with that you wish you had? No, I know the answer.
I think you know who that is.
Yeah. Kate Bush.
Yeah, well, because we went to see her, so it's Kate Bush. She is the most extraordinary, uncompromised, talented lady who, I think, if it was a bloke, the plaudits would be 10 times. She's astonishing. She's an amazing entity, and the fact that I used to live opposite her for the briefest of times, but never got to meet her, and she lived in Eltham. But no, it's Kate Bush is just I mean, there's artists that I'd like to have worked with but I don't think I could have cut it. I mean, when I listen to Miles Davis and I listen to just this kind of thing that I'm really into with drumming at the moment. There's the most astonishing thing for me is about control. When you hear drummers that have control, and someone like, not necessarily a really householdy name drummer, but someone like Jimmy Cobb, who could literally pick a tune up with a quarter note and a hi-hat on 2 and 4, and a drummer that over this kind of period that has absolutely blown me away is Ed Thigpen, who plays with the Oscar Peterson Trio. Right. And that kind of entity, that band, Oscar, Ray Brown, and Ed on drums, and they did a few albums with different sort of different featured artists, like Stack, people like that, but they sound like one thing. It's the dynamics and the tightness of that group is just, I'm beholden to it. And, from that kind of thing, I love people like Clyde Stubblefield, on that mid-70s James Brown stuff. It's so tight and it's so dynamic. And it's that kind of thing that I really love and listen to. But if there's a contemporary artist, it would have to be, I'd love to do something with Kate Bush. Just the one world tour would be. If she decides to do one, I'll do it. I'll do it for PD.
Yeah, and me. All right, a really daft question from someone, which I'm going to ask anyway. Who's better, you or your brother? They didn't say better at what.
Yeah, better at what? I mean,
exactly.
He's got more big cars than I have.
I presume they meant drumming.
Yeah, drumming. Well, interesting thing that when I studied with Bob Armstrong, and as I said about the nature nurture and the talent and the not so much talent, Alan never practiced that much. He really wasn't a practicer, and I took him to a drum clinic once, and he was bored. He didn't like it. It wasn't for him, and I remember being very apologetic to Bob Armstrong because Alan had not been practicing his Jim Chapin swing stuff. And I remember Bob saying to me, not worried, he's going to be in a really big band. And he was right. And he did his 10 years and got out. And it's nice because he's kind of back playing on Instagram, just doing sort of play along stuff for Oasis fans, and did a little something for the NHS, and and it was really lovely to see him back, because to me he doesn't look like he's kind of lost what he had, because it wasn't overtly technical. It wasn't sort of about a peak level of technical fitness. It was about feel and groove, because it was Charlie Watts, it was James Brown drummers. That's what he liked, Yeah. So it's a completely different thing. But I think if you're saying about who had more natural talent, probably Alan did, Right. But who had more enthusiasm, possibly for the long haul, then that would be me, Yeah. I'd love to see him get back out and do something, It would be great. And I mean, I've seen that. I think Bonehead's doing some stuff with Monkey Boy, yeah. And it would be great if they just got a call and got something and did something. I think it'd make a lot of people happy,
Yeah, yeah.
What
It's funny because we're supposed to be doing with me and with Rich, obviously, Ashcroft, doing the gig with Liam at Heaton Park. Yeah. Like probably tomorrow or something, but obviously it's not happening. But I hadn't seen Liam for donkey's years until we were doing a gig in Norway 2 years ago or something. And he comes up and he goes, "Fucking hell, Mincelli, you fucking cunt. You still got it, haven't you?" Kisses me on the lips and then strolls off again. It's like, that's you. Which then leads me on to the third question I can remember, which was, what was it like being on tour with Oasis? as their drummer, not, just being on tour with them?
I actually, because I was invited in as sort of special super sub, as I did with Ocean Colour Scene that time, I came in and just played the songs because the drummer was indisposed, and so I had nothing to lose. I had nothing to kind of worry about really, and Paul wasn't doing anything, and I phoned Paul and said, do you mind if I do it? It was 2 months, I think it was, and I absolutely had a ball. I really, really loved it, and I got on with everybody, and Liam and Noel were not arguing and fighting. There was no sort of tension, no stress. And because if there was, I didn't care. Exactly. I was there to do a job. So I really loved it. And I've actually, it's a funny one with Oasis because there's so many kind of variations of history and it's not like the Stones. It's kind of, this one came in and that one came in and this one did this. And I'm still very good friends. I still stay in touch with Gwigsy and I still stay in touch with Bonehead and obviously Alan. I've never really seen Liam or Noel out and about, but that tour was absolutely great, and there is footage of it knocking around. There's like us playing at the Greek Theatre, and there's some stuff in Toronto. There's some stuff at Radio City Music Hall, and it's really good. It's good. I think I gave it my own thing, and that was great. So for a tour in terms of pressure, that I didn't actually find any great pressure. I've been on tours with more pressure, shall we say?
Yes. the legendary submarine of hate.
People wanted to fight me in Madrid hotels and stuff like that.
Rather drunk people wanted to fight you in the car park for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah.
What was the other one? Oh yeah, because you mentioned Overshadowed. Someone said, "Will there be another Family Silver album?"
Well, will we ever work together again? Of course we will, but it's just very, very difficult. It's very difficult. It's not. We can't sort of roll the wheels of time back to say, like, let's make an album like you made Moseley Shoals, where we're all living on frozen pizzas, and you know what I mean. You can't do that because we have responsibilities. I don't really think that the crowdfunding thing it was a great experiment, and I love everybody supported, but it's not something I'd really want to do again. So it's also very difficult for once you get beyond a certain age in this country. I'm not chipping on this country, but people don't really want to hear too much in the way of new music. No. And I think we got told quite in no uncertain terms when we had to cancel the tour that we put together. It's like, well, if you were going to do some Ocean Colour Scene and maybe a few Weller tunes and a few Mother Earth tunes, it'd be sold out. And we go, but we don't want to do that. And so you just, I just, it's like I'm there in the studio to if I can do it, and we did some tunes. I'm not into that sort of thing. It's like it was great playing with the Trio Valori, but at the end of the day, there's sort of certain practicalities at a certain point in the music industry that you have to go, well, we can't really do this anymore, and it's hard, and anybody that manages it, but I think people that have got beyond a sort of certain stage in their career, they have a fan base, probably people like Paul, like Richard, like Liam, Noel. You've got your fan base and you take them with you. So, that there are certain songs that they are expecting to hear and would be very disappointed if they don't. But then you put your new stuff in and you kind of take it, you take everybody with you. To turn around and just say, we're just going to do all new songs tonight. The reality of the audience that are coming to that kind of show are like, well, I didn't sort of, get a babysitter to come out and hear stuff I don't know, That's just the kind of practicalities of it. So even though now like what I've been doing with Chris and Joel is we've been focusing our efforts into TV, and we've written a score for Sally's new TV show, which should have been filmed by now, but obviously isn't. And that, to me, is a much more satisfactory way to actually place music into an environment, where you've got a chance of it actually being heard possibly at this juncture, because it has to be associated with picture to get it out there. And the show that we're doing has been sold to America, so that's a nice thing to know. But God, no, I love playing with you. I love playing with Matt. I love playing with, I'm not one of these, oh, we shall never work again brigade, but it's just the practicality of it and what we have to do to keep things going all the time in general, and all these kids that we've got and dogs and things like that, because that's where we're at, really.
Yeah, which is there was someone else said, will there be another True Valore record? It's the same principle, isn't it? It's like
it's
we didn't stop doing them because we didn't want to do them. It's just there's got to be a reason beyond the music when you get to a certain age to do it, because when you're away doing the music, even if it's just writing it, all the other things that attention that people want from you, you can't, because you have to shut them off. Whereas when you're younger, there was none of those things. It's just totally that, because that's the record you're making. And then obviously, as you said, you get some more sort of bigger names, heritage acts, and they can introduce bits of the new music, but then still need to frame it with the package. It's like when we went to see Kate Bush. Yeah. She was able to do side 2 of Ariel, but not at the beginning and not at the end. It was like in the middle, because it had been sandwiched with the stuff where everyone was going, oh my God.
Yeah, and still managed to get away with not doing probably her most synonymous hits.
Exactly.
But I've done a few things. Matt and I did some stuff up in Sheffield, and it's a little kind of thing that just guitar and drums, and it's called Heritage Act, and basically it sounds like Henry Rollins.
Wicked.
Yeah, it's really like out there, sort of almost My Bloody Valentine sort of stuff. We had a bit of studio time, so we just sort of went, oh, come on, it's like only 4 tracks we recorded, and we just did it in the room, and it's very violent and sort of nasty and stuff, but it's called Heritage Act, so don't expect to ever hear it.
Brilliant. Well, the last question I can remember was, what are you working on now? What's next? But obviously, you've said it's the whole thing with Hagen White for the.
Also, I mean, Sally's got her own production company now. Sally's production company, Saffron Cherry, is doing really, really well. So obviously, she's kind of always really, really busy at the moment. So rather than trying to sort of clash heads over the fact that we've got 10-year-old twins, what we're doing is we're trying to work together, and it works for me. I've got my, I think. The people say to me, oh, you're not touring so much. It's like, I used to love touring, and I know you might say, well, he's a bit of a snobby old fucker, but I used to love touring when we would maybe go out to Italy, to Verona, and we'd get there at 7, and we'd have a meal and a walk and a glass of wine the next day, bit of culture, sound check, and then fly back. And then when it turned into like, right, your flight's at 3 o'clock in the morning from Stansted, no, your hotel won't be ready at 11. At that point, at 50 years of age, you're kind of going, oh, I don't really fancy that, So between, I've got a studio in Hextable that I share with my colleague Danny Roux, where I teach 1-to-1, all being refitted with screens at the moment, which is great for social distancing. I've got my drum room now, which is now a full microphone kit, full mics, Logic, and an engineer that works remotely with me, which is really good. I've got the job at Trinity with 15 extraordinarily young, great percussionists. So between having that relationship with Sally, who's doing so well at the moment, basically I get up in the morning, once the twins are at school at 8:30, I've pretty much got till 4 o'clock to do anything I want to do musically. And I get a lot done. Yeah. I get a lot done. And, it's not so much touring, but, that may change, when it comes out of it. Although I don't fancy doing one of these driving things. I must admit, that looks like hard work. But, so never, as I say, never say never. But, the last few years with doing all the stuff that I've done, I've just found it really a lot easier to be kind of at home in my sort of little hovel, doing my stuff, and I've got the YouTube channel going as well, which that to me is something that is a legacy for the future, building that up to the point where it hopefully starts to become monetized. Because, you know, I'll play for beans, but you have to think about the realities of it. So between the YouTube channel, my work at Trinity, my work at Goldsmiths, doing stuff from here, doing stuff from Hextable, doing stuff in Sheffield, you know, supporting the family. We've taken a bloody dog on now. It's like, you know, I've never sort of been busier, but in a different way, I guess. So
yeah. No, absolutely. What's the name of the thing in Hextable? Because we'll put a link to it as well.
It's called Amp School,
right.
AMP Amp School, and it's a great facility. It's at the moment we're closed because it's in what's classed as a leisure centre. But it's an actual studio, and Danny, who's the drummer with the real thing, we share it as, you know, but it's of a decent size that we're having screens put in so that we can actually teach socially distanced 10, 12 feet away. And I think that's going to be something that, because for a lot of musicians who've maybe got like a little room, that's going to be quite a hard thing to actually sort of get back into doing, you know. So we're thinking a little bit out the box and thinking we'll get the screens in and we can sort of offer, you know, one-to-one teaching from September. So yeah, that's it. There's plenty going on. You know, would I ever like to tour America again? No, not asked really. Would I like to get out and play in Spain and Italy again?
Yes.
Of course. You know, do I want to go back to Japan again? Yes, of course I do. But you know, these are things that we've done. I've done Japan been to Japan 25 times, and the next time I go, I want to go on holiday. I want to actually take the kids to Tokyo, you know, Disneyland, and to see the zoo and you know, see the sights of Tokyo that we briefly saw when we were working, you know. So yeah, there's still loads and loads to do, but I do think that for what has actually happened without really me doing anything about it, this unforeseen thing that has changed the music business, I think I kind of foresaw a change in the music business 5 years ago. Yeah. And thought I've got to be reactive to this. I've got to set myself up as to where I want to be, rather than, you know, everything's stopped, I've got no work, you know. So, you know, you just constantly got to push. And I mean, you know, I love to be out making records and hopefully getting back out to do that. But at the moment, you know, it's busy enough.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, same, yeah, totally. And what was the last question? Can't remember it. No, I'm going to close this with a question from me. What's the bizarrest thing you've ever experienced on tour?
Oh, wow. That's, I think lawyers would be involved in that. God, no. There's been some sort of, there's been some weird times. Let's just say there's been some weird things.
I knew you couldn't answer that.
You know, you just kind of go, whoa, yeah, okay, and take that in your stride. And is that normal? Is that you know? But you know, I think that kind of, there was some sights to be seen in the early 90s, I guess, weren't there, all around? You know, yes. When sort of Oasis and Paul and OCS were all flying around, and you know, you've got characters like, you know, Josh wandering in and seeing how far he can carry a knife around Europe, and then we'd bump into Manny and the Primals at various airports and things like that, and hotels. Yeah, you know, it was a good time. You know, it was fun.
It was a good time, but not all the time.
Not all the time.
Brilliant. Well, Stephen White, a round of applause from me. There will be a virtual and real round of applause from people when they finish watching it. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Look after yourselves.
Absolute star.
Take care. Love you.